for as men, we often like to open up and say we're struggling and we're really struggling. Like I said this in a podcast earlier today, you know, as men, we'll go through like ridiculous ordeals, you know, we'll run a marathon and we'll do all sorts of things to avoid to like express that
Yeah.
emotional feeling. But there was you that was like, I'm going to call my mum and tell my mum how much I'm struggling. Like, tell me, I'd love to know a bit more about that moment, like how that felt for you.
I was terrified. My mum is, um, she can be quite fiery, and she's a big character, and she's got a lot of personality, and you know, she's dealt with a lifetime of her own stuff. So for me to kind of give this to her was scary, because I was aware of how big it was for me. So for me to give this to someone else and say, I don't know what to do, you kind of deal with it, felt like I was aware of how heavy that was. But she took it, and she kind of held it, and she held me, and she got me to a place of healing. And I don't mean like emotionally, I mean she physically got me to a rehab center where I could start the process, and none of us really knew what that looked like. None of us had been there before. You know, addiction wasn't something that we were familiar with. So we kind of all, I say all of us, being my entire family, went on a journey together. Me obviously being at the forefront, because that's where the work needed to happen. But addiction is a family illness, and there was, you know, without shifting the responsibility, we all had a part to play. So I mean, yeah, the conversation now was a bit of a blur. I don't really remember too much of it. I just remember sitting. It's ironic, because I don't know if you've ever been to a WeWork. They have something called the wellness room. I was in the wellness room, feeling incredibly unwell, and that's where I made the phone call, and it all changed from there. Really, that's kind of where the journey started. Yeah.
And you describe healing, like what did that mean to you, or what does it mean to you when you look back? Like, what was that healing process? There's the physical, but it sounds like you're erring towards like emotional and even kind of going
Yeah.
back.
It was a complete deconstruction of who I was and who I thought I was, and you know, unpacking all of the different layers of the things that had happened throughout my life, whether they were big things or small things, just kind of unpacking, I guess, the traumas and the experiences that had affected me in a certain way. And it was really breaking me down in a loving way to then build me back up again, and to become someone that I recognized, because the person in the addiction was not someone I knew. I didn't know, you know, throughout the time that I was in active addiction, you know, being up all hours of the night and the morning, and wandering the streets to find your dealer, and, you know, doing all those things, I that wasn't me. I didn't know that person, and I remember at the time it feeling so alien. But because I was in the grips of it as much as I was, I didn't really have a choice. And so there was a big part of kind of accepting that the things that I had done and the things that I'd experienced were not because I was a bad person. It was because I was just sick. And it was really a big part of it was reframing that, because I hated myself. You know, there were things that I'd done that, you know, in my opinion, were quite unforgivable. And so it was hard for me to come to terms with that, and to accept that I had done those things, and to also accept that I deserved to be forgiven. Yeah.
That's a big piece there. I deserve to be forgiven, because often when we think about people with addiction, there's a kind of old narrative of kind of there's something faulty or wrong with them.
Sure.
But the research is showing so much different, you know, to do with childhood trauma and pain and the things that have happened in their life that leads to this way of coping with whatever's going on internally with this external substance or device or whatever it may be. How did you find how forgiving were the people around you?
They were forgiving. It didn't come without its, without its boundaries, and without its a kind of measures in place, because I needed to be trusted again, and that was a process. So I had to earn people's trust, and that took a long time. And even now, 6 years on, there's still elements of the past. If I'm behaving in a certain way, or things come up, there's definitely kind of raised eyebrows in certain circumstances, and I think it all comes from a place of love, and also a place of fear that that I don't want to say I may go back there, because I'd like to think I won't, but you're never too far away from it. I'm only ever one bad decision away from going down that path again. So these things never really go. And I think once an addict, always an addict, just an addict in recovery, really.
Mm. How about the trust of yourself? Did that take time for you to kind of build up, like the trust and belief in yourself to go, okay, I'm going to make better decisions and choices?
Definitely. It's kind of like anything. Like, you just need to, the more you do it, the more you kind of flex that muscle, it kind of becomes easier. And there were so many times that I really had to check in with myself about decisions I was making, and really kind of understand where they were coming from, and where they would lead me. And I know a lot of people in recovery, and I've been quite privileged enough to help a few people, a few friends, kind of get their recovery and kind of get into the swing of it. And I've always said, you have to just be honest with yourself. That's the truth. And we are such good liars and such good manipulators that we can end up lying and manipulating ourselves if you really want to. And so when you're doing something, or making a decision, or or going to an event, or being around certain people, you really have to just, and I know it sounds so simple, but you really have to just be honest with yourself. And if there's any part of you that thinks that it's a bit of a red flag, then you have to listen to it. Because it can be dangerous, and kind of lead you back to square one.
That inner voice, like trusting that inner knowing. And actually, because I'm hearing what you're saying, it's not just kind of listening. I'm hearing this and I'd love to know what your process is, because I imagine there is one of like pausing and going, "Oh, what am I really up to here? Like, what is this really about? Like, what's the process like for you to connect to that inner knowing?"
I think for the most part, it's understanding the feelings that are happening, and kind of naming them. And do I feel scared? Do I feel anxious? Am I excited? Am I sad? I think once you name it, it kind of makes it easier to then draw a line to where it's coming from. And truthfully, it can be as simple as, is this decision gonna lead me to pick up, or to use, or to relapse? Or even a few weeks ago, I was at an arcade with some friends, and we took one of my friend's sons out for the day, and we went to an arcade, and we were all kind of playing whatever. And I had to decide whether I was gonna partake in something as simple as those machines where you put the coins in and they kind of knock the coins off the end. But because one of my addictions was gambling, I need to be honest about whether something like that is going to trigger me, and kind of send me back in that direction. Because I know that once I start, history tells me that once I start, I cannot stop. So I need to do everything in my power to not make that first move, really.
It's quite quite a deep self, and not just self-awareness, but like of the moment of like, oh, what's this? There's something in front of me. I think of those little machines, and you put the 2 Ps, 1 piece, whatever, and you stop and you stop before it and go, what's the purpose of me doing this? Where am I trying to
Yeah.
go to with this? And what could be the consequences? It's like a slowing down I'm really hearing. Like,
Yeah, and it's a playing the tape forward, you know. It's kind of thinking in your mind what the next steps are going to be, and kind of going as far as the outcome, and just ensuring that you're staying safe, and you know, if you're truly honest with yourself, you can follow those steps one way or the other. Your experience will tell you what needs to take place for you to end up where you don't want to be. So it's just an avoidance of that, really, and that's obviously in its simplest form.
Because there's like, you know, often in our psyche, there's these competing voices for direction. You know, there might be the inner critic that's like berating us for even pausing and, you know, being silly. And there's a part of us that wants to be more hedonistic or whatever, you know, the multiple parts. How do you find a kind of center place almost where you can observe and listen to those different parts of you?
I think it comes with practice. I think that, you know, I've been kind of doing it for so long now that it's really second nature. Like I tend to live in that space between each of them, which, you know, is not always positive, because it means that, you know, even the positive things, you know, the excitement and the joy and the fun, you know, I almost need to think about it before I engage in that as well. So it definitely limits, like, you know, it definitely limits spontaneity and kind of those like instant emotions that you can get. But, you know, it keeps me safe and it keeps me grounded, and it means that I can live well and, you know, not be unwell, really.
Yeah, but it's quite the deep work to be really that present. There's a presence that comes with this that, you know, so many people really struggle with impulse control and making bad decisions. And obviously this has kind of been forced upon you to some degree, but like there's this presence that you have cultivated to, like, not just be here in the moment, but also to some degree, it sounds like, to play, as you say, play the tape forward, but not just from a catastrophe point of view, because that's what the mind loves to do, you know, think of the worst case scenario, but looking at things from this kind of quite grounded, neutral place and be like, okay, how's this action going to take me forward? If I talk to this person in this bar, where could this lead?
It's kind of like an emotional sobriety. You know, a therapist that I had would describe it as an emotional sobriety, and that is kind of living sober without the use of not just drugs and alcohol, but also the behaviors that can kind of trigger that kind of drunkenness without the substance. And that is about making bad decisions as well, you know.
Just like seeking intense emotions. When I think of the, you know, emotional drunkenness, is like seeking intense emotions, like lust, or like zeal, excitement, and we do that often through a thing. Got it. Okay.
Okay. But I'm familiar with that, because, you know, when you kind of put down the drugs and the alcohol, and, you know, in my case the gambling, you tend to look for things that can replace that, and that are, you know, a bit more subtle. And, you know, for me, that's always been relationships. That's where my addiction plays out now. So, you know, it's about that emotional sobriety within those circumstances.
And that must be quite a hard one to deal with, because relationships are like, we're almost what's it called, pushed to seek the intensity inside of relationships, and even the kind of intense bonding quickly and so forth in the relationship world.
That is something I'm still learning to deal with, and kind of separating that, the kind of intenseness. You know, I've always related that intensity to love, and actually it's, you know, a friend said to me that real love is boring, it's quiet, it's slow, and, you know, the intensity comes from toxicity and game playing and, you know, all of that stuff, and that's not love.